hear from the President of the United States. He will address the country in mere moments now, speak from the East Room. It is going to be a confirmation of a huge development.
Good evening. Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda. Tonight, we give thanks to the countless intelligence and counterterrorism professionals who've worked tirelessly to achieve this outcome. The American people do not see their work, nor know their names, but tonight, they feel the satisfaction of their work.
I think women make fantastic analysts. We have patience and perseverance, and we're not always looking for the sexy payoff immediately.
You know, trying to keep track of all the threads of various threats and which ones are real and which ones aren't real and what connects to what. And, you know, people say, why didn't you connect the dots? Well, because the whole page is black.
To pull a story out of all of this information, but there's no one single intelligence looking at all this information. It's a lot of different brains looking. So the more that you can bring people together and, you know, share what's important, the better it works. At that time, the people who had really deep expertise in Al-Qaeda, you know, they were women, and they did a job that at first did not make them very popular with their managers.
I was counseled once in a performance review that I was spending too much time working on bin Laden. They said we were obsessed crusaders, overly emotional, you know, using all those women stereotypes. Men throw chairs, women cry. I ask you which one is better. Yes, we were borderline obsessed, but I thought it was for a good reason. And were we crusading? I wouldn't call it a crusade. Were we passionate about what they were doing? Absolutely. And that's another bureaucratic norm at the time. You weren't supposed to be passionate about anything, which I think is ridiculous. How can you do something like this without passion? You can't.
بالجهاد فلا ينتهون حتى تجاهدهم ولا يكف بأس الكفار إلا بالجهاد ولا يقطع دابر الكافرين إلا بالجهاد.
Take a stand. We drove out the Russians, we destroyed the Russian Empire. Now we'll drive out the Americans and we'll destroy the US Empire. It worked then, it'll work here. He felt like the United States was driving a world movement against Muslims and was the driver for everything that was happening that was bad.
Your starting point is Afghanistan. Dolazam is the godfather of the Afghan jihad. He's the one who called everyone to go and fight in Afghanistan against the Soviets. He helped set up a council of charities to bring people and money to help with jihad. And his partner was Osama bin Laden.
A link chart is the visual representation of a terrorist network, and it's what terrorism analysts spend much of their time building.
My mental image is that, I'm doing Jacob's Ladder. You got the string where you're pulling the strings in your fingers. I feel like that's what I'm doing mentally. Well, we certainly didn't know that Al-Qaeda existed. We didn't know there was a terrorist organization. We knew there was a very wealthy man named Osama bin Laden who was funding a lot of terrorist groups. We knew that there were people from terrorist groups from all over the world hanging out in Afghanistan and in bin Laden's circle.
So you start to see signs of what looks like an organization, but is this bin Laden as a financial manager with a bunch of companies funding various terrorist groups? Or is there a separate terrorist group here? And that was a big question.
Even in the analytical community, there's a relatively smaller percentage of people who are really good at making sense of information that doesn't appear to be connected. So this is what we call pattern analysis, trying to figure out what things look like. And those people, you really need those people to work on an issue like terrorism, counter-narcotic, international arms trafficking, because you've got bits and pieces of scattered information from all over the place, and you have to try to make some sense of it. And these are organizations, certainly Al-Qaeda was one, didn't even want to announce their presence to the world for a long time. You have to try to figure out they're there when they're trying to deny even to their friends that they exist. That takes this talent, which is also a skill. And people would refer to it as magic. Not the analysts doing it, but other people who didn't have that talent referred to it as magic.
What I have here are four $50.
When you're following an intelligence event, sometimes things move and change in ways that you can't see. You might think it's in one place and it pops up in another, and you can't see how that happens.
So these coins are going to jump one at a time from here all the way over to here, but they're going to do it invisibly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Watch. Did you see it jump?
Reality is changing all the time. A single fact may come in, which dramatically changes your understanding and your projection of where something's going. 2 and 2. Are you with me? Now, an analyst in the intelligence profession is dealing with highly ambiguous situations in which information is arriving incrementally in fragments. Are you with me? You never get the whole picture. The picture changes as these pieces arrive. Your perception of reality changes. You have to be very clear about what you concretely know and what you don't know. Alex Station was a collection of people who had backgrounds in everything from analysis to operations. When you think about the CIA, there's a few different cultures there. One is an analytic culture, people who try to assess things, figure out what is actually happening somewhere and project ahead. And an operational culture, that is people who go out and collect intelligence, develop human spies, handle them, run them, if you will. The unique thing about Alex Station was the fusion of analysis and operations. We pushed the analysts and the operations people together. So the operations people knew everything the analysts were thinking, and the analysts knew everything the operations people were doing, covertly, clandestinely, secretly, dangerously. And the fusion of those two things gave that organization the magic it had.
The people I worked with in the beginning were 6 women. I walked in my first day there. I turned around my colleagues. This is a bay of 6 analysts. And I said, does anybody have any Tums? And all these doors opened with these gigantic bottles. I thought, oh my God, what have I done to myself?
When I moved over, there was a group of women that I reached out to.
We were trying to protect the United States. Whether we could do that, it's a big burden.
I was drawn to those women because of the job that they were doing. I mean, substantively, they were so immersed in finding bin Laden and tracking, and some of them had been around working this subject matter for so long that they were the people I went to. It wasn't even because they were women. Gina Bennett was a mentor of mine and still is. She worked on Al-Qaeda for 20 years. Gina and Barbara, they put a stake in the ground and said, it's okay if we're not operations officers. We can be just as effective.
The rest of the organization didn't necessarily think much of terrorism analysts. And he said, but the terrorism people are just tracking things. That's not a real analysis. That's just tracking things. So we, poor lowly terrorism analysts, we were tracking things.
You're going to have certain kinds of people who are going to be the first ones to see something. When you're the first one off the block, by definition, you're going to be in the minority. That's what we were.
She was very dedicated to her job. She was there a lot. You know, Jennifer was one of that first group, and she was always very intense, very focused, really passionate about it from the beginning, and a real hard charger from the beginning. Jennifer was focused on finding bin Laden. She was adamant that she was gonna stay around on that team until it was done. She could be really abrasive. Yeah. But, you know, teams are made up of people with all different kinds of personalities, and in the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. What matters is getting the job done. And she certainly could do that.
We had a camaraderie. And in the beginning, we were such a small organization that we really had a very close relationship.
On the operations side, this is where all the spies work.
Which are the ones you always see in the movies, are running around recruiting assets and, you know, playing James Bond or whatever.
It is dangerous. It is dangerous.
These guys need confidence to be able to pull that off. There's a fair amount of bravado.
You know, we're case officers, all right? We're the jet fighters. We're the gangsters. We're the doers, you know. Analysts, come on, man.
I think a component of the personality, in some cases, for the job. There's varying degrees of that.
I was out in the bush, in that arena, downrange, regardless of your environment. You know, oftentimes you see on the movies, you know, you talk about agents. You know, he's a CIA agent. Well, the agents are the people we recruit. Hi, I'm the CIA. I'm assigned to this embassy. Would you like to be a spy? Quite doesn't work that way. case officer's job is to spot, assess, and develop. Find people who have access to secrets, get to know them, get them to trust you, recruit them, and then keep them safe. In my particular experience, because I do speak Arabic.
Alhamdulillah. اسمع وينك؟ لا أنا مش موجود في فلوريدا. لا يا حبيبي أنا موجود هنا في Washington.
I've been asked to meet some of our friends in risky areas, dangerous areas. Obviously, you need to get to the point of building trust. They look in your face and they see an American who's risked a lot to get there, to sit down and meet with them. They do believe, honestly, that you care for their welfare, you care for them, and you respect what they're providing you with. You're playing this chess game.
هنا في الرياض أو هنا في جدة على تليفون 67 10 837 ممكن أن توفر لك تذكرة عن طريق لجنة الإغاثة بتخفيض 75% من خطوط السعودية وتذهب إلى إسلام آباد 67 10 837 يقول هذه البلدة استرجاعنا مصر من الأرض الإسلام.
He was recruiting basically very idealistic Saudi university students to come to fight the Soviets. Then some of them went to Afghanistan, including bin Laden himself. It's intensely religious. I mean, coming here was an intensely religious experience for these very idealistic young Muslim men. And, you know, these magazines have many stories about people being martyred fighting the Soviets and their bodies don't decompose or their bodies smell of perfume. And this was a highly effective propaganda to get other people to come and volunteer. This magazine called Jihad was on sale in countries around the Islamic world. The very first copy was published in 1984. There's a guy called Abu Abdullah in these magazines, and that was bin Laden. No one really knew who bin Laden was at the time.
So during the Afghan-Soviet War, the camps were set up by bin Laden and others to train Afghans and people who came from all over the world to go and fight against the Soviets. Towards the end of the war, some of these camps got converted over into urban guerrilla warfare camps. And this was as what we now know was Al-Qaeda. Were taking over some of these camps and they were starting to train people to conduct urban guerrilla warfare in various countries like Egypt and Algeria. One of the prominent figures in the training camps in Afghanistan is a gentleman who went by the war name of Abu Zubaydah. He was definitely running parts of the camps network. So now it's after the war, in the early 90s, we started to get all these reports about things blowing up all over the world who were from people who had fought in Afghanistan. So that's when we started to say to ourselves, what is going on here? You know, let's try to figure out, is there some kind of an organization? Is it a social movement? What is it? And we're starting to warn, look, this is going to be a problem. And we'd actually issued some of that warning before the first World Trade Center bombing.
Ramzi Youssef, I'm sure everybody knows from the First World Trade Center attack. He is the cousin/nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. And the attack was partly funded by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. The same year, there is the incident referred to as the Black Hawk Down incident. We didn't learn until later the extent to which Al-Qaeda at least was involved. These plots are multiple nationalities. This is not your typical events, right? We can't pin this on any one terrorist group. What's going on here? Oh, I mean, it was bin Laden. There was no doubt that the common purpose had to be bin Laden. All of a sudden, it just hit me that this is a bureaucracy. So by 1998, we're able to say with confidence, this is a worldwide terrorist organization. Bin Laden is the head of this organization. Their goal is global jihad. They want to create a global Islamic government. It's not just about Saudi Arabia. There was still some debate about what's called, because some said it was called the Islamic Army. It was my analytical judgment that it was called Al-Qaeda.
At that time, in '97, Osama bin Laden had declared war on the United States in an Arab language newspaper, and no one paid any attention. You know, the case that I made to them was, you know, if you're going to declare war on the United States, don't do it on the BBC, do it on an American network. And, you know, CNN is seen all around the world, and this is, you know, and also we have a reputation for being, you know, fair. It was a lengthy process. They were very concerned. Are you agents of the CIA? Will you give Osama bin Laden a fair shake if we allow you to do this interview? Eventually, after a month or so, we got the sort of coded message that we're going to go and see bin Laden. They picked us up at dusk in a van, sort of like this, right?
It's yeah, very similar to this, yeah. But in the evening, yeah.
Yeah, in the evening, yeah.
And then they gave us the sunglasses that had cardboard inside them.
Right, a sort of crude blindfolds.
That's right.
Did they put those on immediately on us? Or?
Yep, they did.
Yeah,
that's
right.
The interesting thing is that when you go to Kabul, you go through these tunnels. So the fact that we were blindfolded, you could feel the change in air pressure and actually hear the difference in sound through the tunnel.
So you had something of a good idea of where we were heading. Yeah. And on the other side of this is where Al-Qaeda had its chemical weapons, crude chemical weapons facility.
That's right, yeah.
So we got to the sort of this plateau, right? I think it was about 6,000 feet up, maybe, or something like that.
Something like that, yeah. And there was a small village, the type that would be used by shepherds to put their sheep in at night.
Yeah. Peter Arnett was a correspondent. He was at the time arguably the most famous journalist in the world.
They put carpets down, so they made it respectable. And,
yeah. And then we, as I recall, we waited for some period of time and had some sort of goat-like dinner.
That's right, yeah. Well,
yes, this is like the hostage video. Yeah, the hostage video.
Do you recall when he came in?
Yep.
Hey, he shook your hand, right?
Yep.
And do you remember what that felt like?
It was sort of like a dead fish. It wasn't a strong grasp, cold, a bit like gulbadine. I compare it sometimes to a bank manager's shake. You know?
Thank you, Mr. Bin Laden.
Is there anything you'd like to add?
Mm-hmm.
Anything you'd like to add? Yeah, you changed it.
You're just relax a minute, okay? Just relax now. Ease, I'm not used to this. Well, Mr. Bin Laden's voice is in good condition. It got better as you got more into the subject, as you talked about it.
فنحن قوم نرى أن القتل في سبيل الله هو شرف عظيم تمناه رسولنا عليه الصلاة والسلام كما في الحديث الصحيح والذي نفس محمد بيده لوددت أن أغزو في سبيل الله فأقتل ثم أغزو فأقتل ثم أغزو فأقتل فالقتل في سبيل الله شرف عظيم لا يناله إلا خيار هذه الأمة ونحن نحب القتل في سبيل الله أكثر مما تحبون أنتم الحياة.
I did think that this was an amazing interview. He declared war on the United States for the first time to an English-speaking audience.
فإن قلوب المسلمين مليئة غيظا وبغضا للولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وللرئيس الأمريكي. والرئيس الأمريكي يملك قلبا لا يفقه الكلام.
We asked him why.
الحكومة الأمريكية هي حكومة ظالمة.
You know, he basically gave a laundry list of complaints about American foreign policy in the Muslim world.
وتصرف التصرفات في غاية الظلم والشناعة والإجرام.
We asked him to clarify, did that mean a war against American soldiers or American civilians?
فهو لا يعفى من المسؤولية لأنه هو الذي اختار هذه الحكومة.
He sort of said American soldiers were the primary target. American civilians got in the way, that was their problem.
ولا نأمن ولا نضمن سلامته.
He said that, in his mind, the United States was as weak as the former Soviet Union.
فإن بدا لأمريكا أنه ما زال فيها قوة بعد هذه الإهانات المتلاحقة لكبريائها من فيتنام إلى بيروت إلى عدن إلى الصومال.
And eventually, the United States, if it was subjected to enough violent pressure, would pull out of the Middle East and basically he would get his wish.
What are your future plans?
ما هي مخططاتكم المستقبلية؟
ستراها إن شاء الله في الإعلام وستسمع عنها.
Can we get a couple of still pictures now? Some photographs?
The impact of the interview at the time was, I would say, pretty muted. You know, it didn't get a lot of play because at the time, of course, he hadn't really done anything. Imagine if in 1937 the Japanese army had gone on NBC or RKO to say, hey, we are planning to attack the United States. You know, Pearl Harbor might have turned out differently. These guys repeatedly said publicly, we are planning to attack the United States, and no one paid any attention on it.
وقد ضربت هيبة أمريكا بفضل الله.
وجاء الرد المزلزل وكان القصاص واستهدف المجاهدون المدمرة الأمريكية USS كول.
I always watched their latest statements. Their choices of what they're going to say are very important. Oh yeah, they were cagey at first about claiming credit for anything. They didn't want to claim credit. Then later on, they become more willing to take credit, in fact, demanding credit for it.
فإن جهاد الأمريكان وإن قتال الأمريكان هو من صميم الإيمان ومن صميم التوحيد.
You know, it's all this stuff hitting you, all these horrible images hitting you. Just this rapid fire, horribly evil music video / horror film /
Al-Qaeda is a global organization made up of people from over 60 countries who speak 60 different languages. So they really have to communicate in the clear through these statements. And they're also under a religious obligation to warn their enemy. So for all of those reasons, it made complete sense that they meant what they said.
طيب هذا نحن لما نتكلم هنا نعلم أنه يصل بالضرورة فنحن نبشركم ونطلب منكم الدعاء من جهة ونقوم بحرب نفسية على الخصم تهز هيبته أمام العالم ما في حرج.
They're planning something, but where, when, what? Is it going to be an armed assault? Is it going to be a hijacking? Is it going to be an assassination? A bomb? Is where? There were no real answers.
The CIA did very good warning in that period of time. There are dozens and dozens of reports in which we express the view that bin Laden is intending to attack the United States. We would have weekly or bi-weekly meetings sometimes on exactly what was going on.
It's so frustrating when you can't figure out date and time.
There's always a large band of uncertainty, and that's fertile ground for argument.
And if you warn about every little thing, then you're crying wolf and nobody pays attention to you at all.
Middle East, South Asia, Europe, the United States, where? You just don't know.
We did not at this time and in this report have what I would call actionable intelligence.
I want to know when, I want to know where, I want to know who.
We could not determine time, target, and method.
You know, I really wish I could tell you when and where, but it's not that easy with the clandestine organization. Okay, well, if you just had more human assets, you did less analysis, then we would know all these things. Well, that isn't true.
You could say, we're pretty sure it's going to happen, but we can't make that decision to say you should do or not do. We can say that our bottom line is it looks pretty dangerous.
The headline says, bin Laden determined to strike in U.S.
There were just warning after warning after warning all spring.
Well, you know, with the benefit of hindsight,
we knew something huge was going to happen.
It would seem that this was a perfect warning in August of 2001 that the United States was about to be attacked.
Everybody was completely tense.
Why didn't we do something about this?
The language being used by these guys was like, oh my God, what are they going to do?
الشهر الحرام بالشهر الحرام والحرمات قصاص فمن اعتدى عليكم فاعتدوا عليه بمثل ما اعتدى عليكم
وتلقى أبطال الغزوتين تداريبهم المكثفة وكيفية السيطرة على كابينة الملاحة وإتاحة المجال للطيارين لقيادة الطائرات نحو الأهداف المقصودة وتأمين الحماية لهم حتى لحظة ارتطام الطائرات بأهدافها. واصل الإخوة الطيارون إعدادهم في هدوء تام داخل العمق الأمريكي متجاوزين بذلك الهالة الإعلامية الضخمة المثارة حول القدرات الأمنية والاستخباراتية لأمريكا التي ملأت بضجيجها العالم كله. تلا الاستشهاديون وصاياهم الأخيرة التي بيّنوا فيها الأسباب والدوافع وراء القيام بهذا العمل المبارك.
وأقول للقيادة الأمريكية إن أرادت سلامة جيوشها وشعبها فلتسحب جميع قواتها من بلاد المسلمين.
كي تسترد المظالم حتى الأراضي ساموا رسول أهل العزائم ما دنسوا لحمانا لو طوقته الضراغم حسالة البغي صالت فأين عهد الحواسم ناسوا بأننا أبات نذود ذود القشاعم نحن الذين وطئنا بالخيل عرش الأعاجم بالخيل عرش الأعاجم.
On the morning of 9/11, I was sitting in my office. I had my office was here. The office of the group chief was right next to it. And I had my door open and I looked and there was an analyst running through the row between the cubicles. And it was one of the older analysts. And you don't see older analysts running.
I was in Jordan.
I was at the CIA.
9/11, I was in my office at NSA.
I was at the executive office building for the White House.
I was in the Pentagon when it got hit.
The first breaking news was coming in.
Somebody has it on Real Player at their desk.
The report was saying there was a small aircraft that apparently had hit.
Right then, second plane into the second tower, and I knew.
There was no doubt in that office in that moment that this is what we were waiting for. This is it. That's the words that went through everybody's mind. This is it. This is bin Laden.
It's an attack, it's terrorism, and it's Al-Qaeda.
I knew who they were. I knew what their intentions were.
This is it. They pulled this thing off. We're going to battle stations.
And we were all evacuated after that second plane went in because we thought the next one, that is the Shanksville plane, might be headed for us. It was complete chaos.
Plane flew in under my office. My two assistants looked out the window and saw a 757 fly in under their feet.
The order then went out for the building to be evacuated, except for the counterterrorism analysts.
We essentially decamped from the high rises and moved on into the operations center.
When I said, look, she says we can't go, but if you want to leave, I'll cover for you. And not one of those people left.
"19 guys. Look at their faces. And think about the tragic, terrible consequences. 19. Only 19. 19 representing thousands who went through training camps in Afghanistan. 19 representing all those who had sponsored and trained and blessed these young men on that day.
This is where it gets hard to talk. I have to say the worst moment in my life happened in about November because right after the bombing, you're just so busy. And everybody, cry at home, come to work, be professional, do your job, go home, cry at home, come to work, be professional, do your job. And people were very focused, running around, getting the job done. Only about November, things start to slow down a little bit and the guilt sets in. And that is just the worst. I'm sorry, I'm gonna cry now. Feeling like you wish you could have done something, and especially when all the criticism starts to come in, people would say things in Congress like you were negligent. It's like, really? What did you know about bin Laden before 2001? Nothing. You didn't help us at all. And now you're blaming us for having tried.
This is not a matter of scapegoating. This is a matter of accountability. There's been...
What does the term accountability mean to you?
Prior to September 11th, U.S. intelligence officials possessed terrorist information that, if properly handled, could have disrupted or possibly prevented the terrorist attacks.
It seems from your testimony.
The meeting was the year 2002. FBI at that time. This is a meeting of CIA analysts and FBI officials.
Has anyone in the CIA been held accountable for the failures of September the 11th or the events leading up to it?
Jennifer called me not long after 9/11, screaming at me on the phone, and we were 2-second walk from each other in different vaults, but you did this is your fault, you didn't report on so-and-so, blah, 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 and I screamed back at her and slammed the phone down. And at the time, I was really angry, and I actually really never spoke to her again. But looking back on it, I think it was just a manifestation of her passion and her own sense of guilt. I mean, everybody felt it.
We were told to evacuate Yemen. The entire team already boarded the plane, and I was asked that I should stay, and to talk to an individual named Nathir al-Bahri, Abu Jandal. We showed him a photo book that has a lot of photos in it. He identified Bin Laden, he identified Ayman Zawahiri. He identified the usual suspects that there was no way he would never know. But he didn't identify anyone from the, second tier. No one. And then he closed the book, like, I don't have anything else. Don't know anyone. So I asked him, please, can you look at it again? But I just, please, look at it again. He was annoyed. He said, I just did. There was nothing for friendship's sake. Now friends, or So he did. Same thing. So I laughed. I went like to Bob. I said, "See, I told you. What's going on? What did you tell me?" So I told Bob, my friend. I told him here. I said that you're basically faking. You're not cooperating at all. And I think I won the bet. What are you talking about? I'm cooperating. Come on, really? You're cooperating? Do you think I just flew all the way from DC to talk to you about this kind of like small talk, and I don't know who you are, I don't know what you know? This guy, for example, he was in your guest house in 1999. He was sick. You were taking care of him, putting soup on his lips, and you claim you have no idea who this guy is. I know a lot about your organization. Maybe some of these people in the book are in my custody. Maybe some of the people in the book are a friend of mine. Maybe they are my sources. Every time I ask you a question, most probably I know the answer for. And that's how I gauge if you're cooperating or not. So, do you want to start from the beginning? And he said, yes. So we showed him the book again. He identified almost everyone in the book, that we know he's involved. From the East Africa Embassy bombing, from the USS Cole, to include 8 of the hijackers. And he still insisted that Bin Laden will never do anything like this. And I insisted that he did. And I said, no, Bin Laden did it. And he said, no, Bin Laden did it? Who told you? You did. He was mad, he was furious, because he thought I was putting words in his mouth. I said, no, you told me that Al-Qaeda was behind it, definitely. And I took a manila envelope that I had. I put the photos that he identified, the 7 hijackers or the 8 hijackers. I put them all in front of him. I said, do you want to know who the hijackers? Those are the hijackers. You told me they were Qaeda members. You told me that. He was in total shock. He put his hand like this, and he started shaking. And he asked for, 5 minutes. Gave him 5 minutes, came back. I said, so what do you think now? And he said, I think the sheikh went crazy. What do you want?
فها هي أمريكا قد أصابها الله سبحانه وتعالى في مقتل من مقاتلها فدمر أعظم مبانيها فلله الحمد والمنة. أقسم بالله العظيم الذي رفع السماء بلا عمد لن تحلم أمريكا.
A small group of people, many of them women, were blamed. They were blamed. They failed to connect the dots. If I hear that, the Washington machine turned on them and said, it's your fault. Sit and do a line diagram, and where you failed to connect the dots. The dots were there. It's us who decide that we need to erase the dots. Hello? They're coming at us. Those were late nights. You go home, you're driving, you roll over what operations are going on, what threats you believe are genuine. You're thinking about your friends and colleagues downrange. Sometimes you're thinking about some talking head who launched a bunch of empty bullets, of blame, trying to get their face on the TV and not understanding the sincerity of the people involved. That would cause me grief the next day, because I knew I was gonna have to go in and tell people, listen, they don't understand what you do. Don't you know that? Now let's get it on.
Something that people don't fully grasp is how alone the CIA felt in this period of time. Just by virtue of the evolution of events in history, we ended up at this moment in time with kind of unique knowledge of this phenomenon, Al-Qaeda. I think the feeling all of us had was, this is on our shoulders to prevent this from ever happening again. The day of 9/11, the president pulled us together and said, I want to see a war plan here. Well, that we'd been working on this for a long time. We were ready to go.
The challenge when you look at Al-Qaeda after 9/11 was to understand it well enough first to disrupt it and then dismantle it. We're not in the business of disruption alone, because if you disrupt an organization, the adversary is so committed. I mean, they believe that what they do is inspired by a holy book, that they'll just go on and plot another attack. So the business really became dismantlement. How do we destroy it? And that's a people business. How do you find the operators, financiers, trainers, etc.? And how can you know where they're going to be tomorrow so you can pick them up? The explosion of intelligence at CIA after 9/11 is hard to imagine. You have a small group of people in Alex Station who are looking at the problem pre-9/11. They had limited resources. After 9/11, that small core group of people is dwarfed by the newcomers into the center post-9/11. It was a foundational change in the organization.
They needed managerial horsepower to support the increase in people and budget. I did not know enough about Al-Qaeda. Just what little I had read in the press was not my specialty. But, if you've had 25 years of experience, you come with a pretty good sense of what needs to be done, even if it's a new target for you. Pretty quickly, you learn what you need to learn about that target. I became the head of the Counter Center just about the time when we were dealing with all these threats I mean, it was daily, constant intelligence coming about a second wave of attacks. But I had a reputation for building strong teams.
The phone rang, a senior came on the line, basically said, we need you to come back. You know the gravity of the situation. You need to come back and do what you do. Basically came back to be the senior manager for the worldwide effort against Al-Qaeda. I had a multi-dimensional responsibility. I had to protect my people, you know. We changed the rule book a bit. We were empowered more. We did things more aggressive. My job is to kill Al-Qaeda. Either get shoulder to shoulder, get with us, or get out of our way.
We had been focusing on capturing Abu Zubaydah. He knew who the leadership was. He knew their methods of attack, their targets. He was the highest level Al-Qaeda terrorist that we had ever captured. When we captured him in March, he was severely wounded, and we knew we had to get him out of Pakistan. And in the past, the way the U.S. had dealt with issues like this was to transfer the terrorist to a friendly country for interrogation. But we needed to take responsibility for high-level terrorists ourselves. So we understood what we had to do, and we did it.
We took a lot of bad guys off the streets, and they got put up in this now public knowledge in nice little, let's just say, boutique locations.
Basically, you have two things you have to bring with you to an interrogation room, especially with individuals like Al-Qaeda. You have to bring knowledge, and you have to bring empathy. And if you don't have those two, I think most probably you're going to fail.
And he gave us a couple of pieces of information during that early phase. But then he stopped talking. When he regained his strength, he stopped talking. And we became convinced that we had to come up with a new alternative to doing this because it was not working. Of the 12 techniques, in my humble opinion, were pretty wimpy stuff. You know, like slapping, give me a break. Okay, might be unpleasant to slap somebody, but it's not torture. Grabbing someone from the lapel, bring him in to you, may be unpleasant, and it's an attention grabber, but it's not torture.
We didn't ask for this. We did not ask to get attacked. They did it. And so if we can't make them uncomfortable to save lives, then we've missed the boat here.
I believe that the intention was, we can never allow this to happen. Let's do whatever needs to be done.
They're straight up haters. There is no reasoning with them.
Some individuals who were at the time in places to make decisions believe that the only reason you deal with these individuals is by techniques like this.
If you deal with some of the hardcore art detainees, they might have become compliant, and they may be jovial and engaging, but if you ask them, what are you going to do if you ever get out? They'll go, I'm going to come kill you, my friend.
All the information that came from Abu Zubaydah, we got before waterboarding. Most of these things came from traditional interrogation techniques, by showing people evidence, by putting detainees against each other, by pocket letter. So the traditional interrogation techniques worked tremendously.
We had the interrogators and we had the debriefers. Interrogators would work with a detainee, and once they became compliant, they would step back, and the debriefers, the targeting analysts, the people who knew the most about the target would step in and would begin to question them. Jennifer Matthews was there, sitting in front of Abu Zubaydah, asking them questions.
There is a big difference between being an expert behind a desk and being a field expert.
You can't argue with success. And the fact of the matter is that we were extremely successful. Once we started using the techniques on Abu Zubaydah, and once he became compliant, we started to collect incredible intelligence. Abu Zubaydah gave us the playbook of how to go after these individuals. So in short order, every chief of operations was either captured or killed.
Ramsey bin Oshib, Nashiri, Hambali, KSM. Remember that guy? That was a nice one. But they had him in an Arab yuppie outfit. You know, he's looking very prim and proper. Yeah, I'm like, forget this. I want every guy, bad guy downrange to know what their future is. This is their Mac Daddy. This is their chief gangster. This is your future.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was waterboarded 183 times.
They tried to quantify the numbers of pourings of water. And eventually the pourings of water used in waterboarding became times. So 183 total pourings of water on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed became 183 times, which is crazy.
Look, it's not FBI versus CIA. I know for a fact that everything that we've been told that resulted because of waterboarding, that's not true.
Only 3 terrorists with American blood on their hands were ever waterboarded. In many cases, it was just a few days. In the case of Abu Zubaydah and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, it was just a few weeks.
This program evolved because, you know, some of the stuff that they tried to do was not working. And during the evolution process, I realized that we shouldn't be part of this, and I shouldn't be even a witness for this. And I reported it to our headquarters, and headquarters pulled us out.
We all knew Americans would find out at some point about everything we were up to. There are no illusions. And so you have to try to provide a lens of history that doesn't exist yet. I understand people are uncomfortable with this, but the options we had were not very good.
السلام على من اتبع الهدى. أيها الشعب الأمريكي، حديثي هذا لكم عن الطريقة المثلى لتجنب منهات أخرى. وبين يدي الحديث أقول لكم إن الأمن ركن مهم من أركان الحياة البشرية، وإن الأحرار لا يفرطون بأمنهم. فبالرغم من دخولنا السنة الرابعة بعد أحداث 11 فما زال بوش يمارس عليكم التشويش والتضليل.
In the aftermath of 9/11, people expected and realized he would probably go to Tora Bora, which he did. After Tora Bora, he more likely than not went up to Konar, and then somewhere.
Well, it could have been I always thought of him as running around in the, maybe on the Afghan-Pak border, maybe even in Afghanistan. That's what my favorite would have been, having him in Afghanistan, because that was his spiritual home, so to speak, from the Afghan jihad.
I was asked, where is bin Laden all the time? When I went to testify to the Congress, the first thing they wanted to know is, where is bin Laden? I went to the Oval Office a number of times. I was asked by the president, where is bin Laden? Everybody would ask the same question, where is bin Laden? It was very frustrating to basically have to admit that you didn't know him. One time, one of my colleagues came in to talk to me about where's bin Laden. And I told him, look, you know, I am so tired of this. The next time that the next person asks me, where is bin Laden, I'm gonna say, you know what? Fuck you. Fuck you. And later that day, I went home, and the first thing my wife asked me when I get home is, where is bin Laden? Why can't you find him?
The toughest position to be in Al-Qaeda then was number 3, number 4. Because why? You had to communicate. You had to communicate to get attacks done. You had to communicate. And if you were doing that, we're on you.
Frankly, even though in the back of our minds we knew we had to get him someday, we were actually too busy going after those who were actually plotting against us.
Congratulations, Abu Butthead. You're now number 3 in Al-Qaeda. That's the good news. The bad news is you're now number 3 in Al-Qaeda. You better buckle your chin strap because your career path is probably going to be short-lived.
There's an aspect of the intelligence business called targeting. I think this is a revolution for a couple of reasons. Just in the past 10 years, the agency has transitioned from strategic intelligence to tactical intelligence that helps you identify the movements and locations of one specific individual. I'm not just worried about what Al-Qaeda looks like strategically. I want an analyst who's spending all their time looking at one target with one name. And people whose whole goal in life is following one human being.
I went to the other women who had become targeting officers when I moved over, Jennifer Matthews and some of the other women who had already paved the way, just to ask them, how do I do this? I have to build this from the ground up, kind of like they did on the bin Laden side. You know, how do I do this? We still didn't have a great technical tool to do that. I built a spreadsheet. And when I reached out to Barbara and Gina and a few other women, they just said, that's how we do it. Go for it. That's exactly how you get it done.
You're leaving a digital trail every day. So are terrorists. When that person travels, when that person gets on a phone, when we get information from a courier in Al-Qaeda about who he's touching, and we bounce it against information we might have found out 2 years ago. They're looking at a human terrorist in the field, and they might send a cable to a station that results in action against that target the next day. Somebody who wants in the fight. That's what a targeter is.
You have to intimately know the target that you're going after, how you think that person is going to act, react, what they're going to do that day, what their strategy is, who they're going to talk to, what are their priorities in life. Is it wife number 1? Is it wife number 2? I was in Baghdad shortly after the war started, and it was kind of like being in the Wild West. It was complete chaos. Bin Laden was initially excited about this. He was excited about Iraq. This is something he couldn't, at the time, pull off. So he was happy to support the endeavor. He was such a brutal terrorist. I just felt like we owed it to the people of Iraq to remove him. It seems so strange that I never met Zarqawi. My former colleagues in the Jordanian intelligence service used to call him my boyfriend.
مع كوني أميرا لتنظيم القاعدة في بلاد الرافدين خادم الجهاد
I felt like I knew Zarqawi too well.
المعتز بالله تعالى أخوكم أبو مصعب الزرقاوي.
He was a quiet guy in a pathological sort of way. I mean, he was a monster. There were calls at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning from the group chief every time a bombing happened, every time he set off a BBID, every time he targeted a mosque or anything. You know, I was thinking about him 24/7, and it wasn't pleasant after a while.
The model, to me, is very clear. Our special forces, our JSOC operators, their analysts, our analysts, their operators, our operators, were working in hand. They were downrange. They were downrange in our field stations, assisting in operations, bringing that expertise there. And the lessons and the ability to take intelligence operations combined with special operations to create a synergy, a deadly synergy.
And your job as a targeting officer in a war theater is to help point boots on the ground or something up above toward a target and be as accurate as possible.
For me, war is sort of like something radioactive that you shouldn't touch unless you've done a tremendous amount of understanding of just the damage that it will do. You can flirt with the idea that I can cross the line and go into the dark side, and then I can walk back because I'm going in the dark side for a good purpose. And there are times when that may be appropriate, but it is dangerous. It's easier next time to cross.
من الذي فرض عليكم شأن الحرب على العراق؟ الأشلاء ممزقة تحت أنقاض البيوت. أسئلة؟ لماذا؟ وين المقاتلين الهنا اللي يقاتلونهم؟ لا يوجد بين النساء والأطفال.
I did not like being on the raids. I was an analyst. I just didn't,
I think there are questions about an intelligence organization that slowly gets involved in executing these types of global counterterrorism operations. That's a real mindset change. The war was not an agnostic video game. It was a personal game where you know you're responsible not only for the lives of Americans, but for going up against an adversary that you got to kill or capture.
August of 2004, I think we did 18 raids that month in Iraq, our force. 2 years later, in 2006, same month, Iraq also, we did 300 raids. Our ability to collect intelligence, act on intelligence, and then collect more intelligence had taken an almost industrial size and speed to it.
It was definitely a well-oiled machine. There were rolling raids, sometimes those were fruitful and sometimes not so much. I think sometimes the momentum sort of overtook the substance of what we were going after. You know, it's like, there's another target, let's go after it. Just because we can. The machine just kept going.
We had executed thousands of these kinds of raids in Iraq and Afghanistan, and we got better and better at them. So it was that evolution, in particular with the CIA, in ways that we just couldn't have imagined in 2001 or 2002, but were absolutely critical, as it turns out, in order to be able to meet this threat.
But you definitely need to know what your moral center is and how you define that for yourself in order to be able to do that job. I mean, I worked in a center where my job was to hunt a person down to capture a kill. I mean, I had to be okay with that. And, you know, the paradox of wanting to save the women and children of Iraq and kill someone in order to do that wasn't lost on me by any means. But, you know, I can justify that for myself.
The war on terror. How can you have a war on terror when terrorism is a tactic? You have a war against people. So the question immediately becomes, who are the people that we're fighting the war against? And I think still most people don't understand why they hate us.
فلا تعجب عندما يسخرون لأجل هذا المشروع الصليبي من جميع أنواع الأسلحة.
Some strikes are necessary, but if our solution to this kind of problem is to just strike without trying to take effective efforts to prevent the rise of threats, it's endless.
Shock and awe does not end wars on terrorism, it only creates more terrorism. Money starts to flow to terrorist groups, people become more radicalized. Wars on terror should be fought under the radar as quietly as possible. But counter-terrorist operations are, by their nature, not very satisfying to a frightened public.
We were working closely with the Bin Laden unit, and the dynamic of the relationship between Zarqawi and Core al-Qaeda sort of turned a lot of assessments on what was happening with Core al-Qaeda on its head. Bin Laden didn't know, I'm sure, what he was getting into with Zarqawi, how fundamentally different he was from some of his other al-Qaeda leaders. He did not have the same academic background that a lot of the al-Qaeda scholars had. He didn't have the same, for lack of a better way to put it, professional sense of jihad as al-Qaeda did. He didn't understand the rules of the game. He just thought he could enact any strategy regardless of how brutal it was. It was surprising to hear that Zarqawi was not being deferential. He was being insubordinate. Hassan Ghul was our emissary from al-Qaeda. He was actually bringing over another letter from al-Qaeda Central to Zarqawi about how he should be conducting operations in Iraq. When we realized that Hassan Ghul would be traveling to Iraq, We decided this was an opportunity for us, so we actually planned an operation with, it was my team, with our base and the Kurdish government to capture him. And the Kurdish government kept him, and we definitely gained a lot of information out of him, including al-Kuwaiti's name and the role that he played with bin Laden. Did that answer?
Do you know how this name, Ahmed al-Kuwaiti, came up?
Within the course of a debriefing with the Kurdish government, Hassan Gul gave up the name of al-Kuwaiti, the courier.
Ahmed from Kuwait, it was significant information. Even though we knew that the pseudonym al-Kuwaiti was a throwaway, I mean, who, you know, it's like saying Jose the Puerto Rican, you know, could be anybody. The key is what he told us about bin Laden, not using any other means of communicating. We asked Khalid Sheikh Mohammed about the information of the courier. And he kind of just...
He jumped back. His body language jumped back, he changed. And he said, no, no, no. Look, we all know, even as little kids, if suddenly you react and go, no, 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 it probably means yes, yes, yes.
He had not been truthful, but later, and this is the benefits of having black sites, we intercepted a communication from him to some of the other detainees. He told his fellow detainees not to say a word about the courier, thereby telling us a lot about the courier. That he's of tremendous importance, and that we were onto something.
In late 2007, the bin Laden cell came to me. Some of these people have been doing this well before 9/11. I mean, they go all the way back to Alex Station. These people had spent their lives on this target. They said, we're going to try another approach. It's got to be the courier network. We've got some information on couriers. We're going to begin to build from that. The way it works is, information comes in, you catalog it, you organize it. You know, that little nugget there could sit fallow on your shelves for 4 or 5 years until something else comes in that's suddenly very illuminating about something that you may have had for a very long period of time. That actually happened in the work we did to hunt for Osama bin Laden by trying to track his courier.
It took years for the agency to recruit the human source that eventually gave us the true name. That's why we're in the business of clandestine human intelligence, because in many cases, all these fancy gadgets and everything else won't give you the information that you really need, a true name. And we finally got his true name, which is whatever it is, whatever Arabic name, you know. But the true name, we were able to find out a lot about him. From then on, you know, the agency was able to do what he does so well, track the guy and find him.
Very soon after that, I briefed the president. I said, I gotta tell you, Mr. President, my guys, they seem a little optimistic about this. They actually think this could lead somewhere.
projecting force and intelligence and assets crossed that border, and that's what Coast represented. Their focus was across over there in Waziristan, because that's where the enemy was.
Jim Matthews was the chief of base of the CIA base down there. She was there to have her fingers right on the pulse of the information that was coming through the base. She never enunciated that, so to speak, in such stark terms, but my sense was she was there to target and kill senior Al-Qaeda leaders. I asked her, "Do you think we're gonna get them?" She smiled and said, "We'll get them eventually, and I hope I'm a part of it." So.
الحمد لله بدأت فكرة النفيذ تقوى فقدر الله أن أرى من ذلك. لقد رأيت الشيخ أبو مسلم الزرقاوي وكأنه في المنام وكأنه في بيتي. لقد كان وجهه كالقمر ليلة البدر. لقد كان مشغولا وكأنه يعد عمليا. وتمنيت أيضا أن نقصف تمكن معي. ثم عبد الفقير أبي لجان الفرساني من الأردن، عمري 32 سنة وأعمل طبيبا في الأردن.
He's not at all what you'd expect as a radical. He's a doctor, he's working at a refugee clinic. Turns out he had this very dangerous hobby on the side, which was writing this blog and getting himself in trouble. Over a period of months, he becomes one of the most visible writers on the internet, and the CIA and the Jordanian intelligence go all out to recruit Balawi to be a spy. Over several weeks, they convince him to go to work for them.
مسألة بدخول الأجهزة الأمنية الأردنية للمنزل الساعة 11:30. اعتقلوني وأرسلوني إلى وادي السير لإحدى المخابرات هناك. فبعد أن اعتقلوني واستجوبوني وعرضوا علي مبالغ تصل إلى ملايين الدولارات هي من أعطاني الأموال الطائلة، هي من دفع للتذكرة. لذلك أنا أتيت إلى وزيرستان من خلال مطار الشام.
Balawi finds his way into Pakistan and essentially disappears. Very likely somebody suspected him as being an informant and maybe cut his head off. Nobody hears anything from Balawi for 3 months. Suddenly he's back on the radar screen again and he's saying, "I've gotten inside." Balawi's a doctor. He's now beginning to treat the #2 leader of Al-Qaeda, Ayman al-Zawahiri. When Balawi sends this information to the CIA headquarters, the place goes crazy. Even the White House gets briefed. This young man, Balawi, is going to take us right to #2 and maybe even to #1.
فقدر الله قدرا. الآن المخابرات الأردنية تبحث تظن أن هناك شخص يعطي معلومات عن قادة الجهاد.
The meeting has to take place in a place where the CIA can completely control the environment, and by default, this becomes the CIA base at Coast. It falls to Jennifer Matthews to come up with a plan to get Balawi inside this base at Coast without being detected. Well, the problem is that nobody in the CIA has ever met with Balawi. They make arrangements for him to come into the base without even being searched or checked because they're afraid that somebody might recognize him, his identity might be compromised.
اللهم اهزم المخابرات الامريكيه والاردنيه، اللهم اهزمهم وزلزلهم، اللهم ومنحنا اكتافهم يا رب العالمين، اللهم واجعلنا نسبب مقتل عظيما فيهم يا رب العالمين، اللهم تقبل دماءنا، اللهم تقبل شهادتنا يا رب في علمين.
People have been too quick to blame Jennifer, and that I reject totally, because there were many people looking at this operation. People wanted to believe that the source was good.
عندما يظنون أن هذا الرجل جاسوس، ثم هذا الرجل يتحول إلى قنبلة.
There were also pressures coming from the White House and elsewhere saying, you know, pursue, pursue, pursue. We need to do this. And I'm sure there were people, voices out there saying, maybe not. Maybe we should slow down. That happens in many operations. Didn't happen in this one.
So they set up a plan to get him through the checkpoints without being even looked at by the guards. He gets further into the base, goes to a second checkpoint, goes to a third checkpoint, and gets all the way into the innermost heart of the base, the inner sanctum. There are a total of 14 CIA officers line up to meet him.
When this could come to you for unexpected ways.
Balawi gets out of the car on the wrong side, and he's chanting the words in Arabic, "God is great." Before anybody could stop Balawi, he fumbles for his detonator.
Look, this is for you. It's not watch. It's detonator. To kill as much as I can, inshallah. You will be sent to the hell.
Balawi hits a switch, blows himself up, and there's a terrific explosion that kills almost everybody who's within direct sight of Balawi at the time of the explosion.
We heard the explosion, but when we saw the smoke coming up from exactly where I knew Chapman was, then I knew the base had been hit. We knew that someone had gotten inside the base, and we knew that it was the agency that had been hit, and we knew it was bad. By the time we got on the scene, it was an ugly scene. There were parts everywhere. The conventional unit that was there landed the helicopter right in the courtyard and evac'd as many of the wounded as possible. You know, he said Jen didn't make it. Her logistics chief that we had worked with to close the base on a daily basis didn't make it, and some of her case officers never made it even back to the, they died on the scene.
When you do this and do this and do this, eventually you lose one. And we lost. We lost really good people.
When I heard that Jennifer was in Coast, I was shocked that she was taken out by bin Laden. I mean, it just seemed so surreal that would happen to her. You know, after she spent so many years trying to prevent another tragedy by him. You know, he in effect had anything to do with her death. It's incredibly disheartening.
There was some criticism of the agency. Frankly, I understand that. But you don't get a Abbottabad without Coast. An agency that's not willing to take the risks that were evident at Coast, and which unfortunately ended tragically. That agency, if it's not willing to do that, is not an agency to do what it had to do to build that trail all the way to Abbottabad. And in fact, some of the human beings who built the trail to Abbottabad were actually killed at Coast. It was kind of Team America in the hunt for bin Laden and the fight against Al-Qaeda. And there is powerful connective tissue between the two events.
بالنسبة لبن لادن مثل هذه العملية الكبيرة الناجحة النوعية، ومن بين هذه النسب هي عملية همام، لأن كانت استهدفت العسكريين وهي أهم فئة لدى تنظيم القاعدة، واستهدفت أيضا عناصر من العسكريين مهمين أيضا وليسوا كأي عناصر، اللي هم عناصر مهمين يعني أهميتهم عالية. كانت عنده قناعة بأنه مهما كانت قوة الأجهزة المطاردة المقاتل وعنصر تنظيم القاعدة إنه لن يقتل إذا لم يخطأ. ما هو الخطأ الذي ارتكبه بن لادن في نظري حتى قتل؟ حب السلطة. فكان يرسل المراسلين باستمرار إليه، من بن لادن إلى عطية الله، ومن عطية الله إلى بن لادن، أنه أراد أن يبقى دائما في الصورة وأن يكون متواصلا معه، بينما كان بإمكانه أن يبقى سنة كاملة بلا لكن بن لادن الذي كان أبجدياته الفكرية أو أيديولوجيته الفكرية الجهاد والموت وكذا، لم يكن يسعى للموت في حقيقة الأمر، وهو يقول أنها الموت جميل ورائع في سبيل المبادئ والأهداف، ولكن في حقيقة الأمر هو لم يسعى للموت، حاول التشبث بالحياة حتى آخر لحظات من حياته، ولذلك عمل كل الأسباب ليبقى حياً.
The hunt for the courier to bin Laden makes complete sense to me. It was based on all of these years of experience working with a very tight-knit group of people who really cared about this and supported each other. We invented the technique that works, and it's the technique that got bin Laden in the end.
I got a call from a former colleague, and he said, turn on the news. You know, I was at home. Turn on the news, the president's going to make an announcement. And I had a feeling, but it's been a good day at the office.
Good evening.
And then finally, it's him. They got him. They got him finally. That was, you know, that was really something.
I'm not sure America has made the effort that it needs to understand what it is we just went through. The really key part is not how to do these operations. The thing to understand is why are the people that we are fighting doing what they're doing? Why is the enemy the enemy? If you don't understand why they're doing it, it's very difficult to stop. We don't speak the language enough. We don't understand the culture enough. We haven't taken the time to not be blind, deaf, and dumb in areas of the world that matter to us.
It's a nice chapter to close. Nice chapter to close. It's not over. Sadly enough, I think we're gonna be in this situation again.
Bin Laden achieved, you know, spreading his ideology beyond what he probably expected it to. How do you kill an ideology? Killing one person doesn't end that.
I don't like it. I don't want it to continue. I hope it stops. I hope we don't live in a world where you deal with an adversary that loses respect for the sanctity of human life. But look, this isn't a picture from a video arcade. This is a human being who has a family and a soul. So when you confront that, what are you going to do? There are philosophical debates you can have, but at the end of the day, the question is, are you going to move or not? Yes or no? Go or no go? That's it.